Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
Potassium is a muscle contraction and feeling emotionally safe, that and salt as well. Why? Well, your heart sits in a bath of sodium and potassium. Magnesium is interesting because it converts into a bunch of different hormones, including melatonin and serotonin. Serotonin helps you feel good, happy, helps you notice things in your environment, be good at your job, I would say, in a lot of ways. Melatonin helps you sleep well, and is also one of the most powerful antioxidants in the body. And you don't necessarily want to be supplementing melatonin. It is way better to supplement magnesium because it does 800 things in the body that we know of now, and plenty more that we don't, I'm sure.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Grin, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed the founder of Upgraded Formulas, Barton Scott. We discussed his health journey in overcoming brain fog and fatigue, along with advantages of hair mineral testing, the importance of potassium, salt, and magnesium, his 11-day fast for healing the body, and his one tip to get your body back to what it once was. This was a really interesting conversation with Barton. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the interview. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin, and I have the founder of Upgraded Formulas, Barton Scott, straight from Austin, Texas. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian. Great to be here.
Great to have you. I'm a little jealous. It's snowing in Chicago, and I'm sure it's nice in Austin.
Yeah, it's good here. Although also like 25. So.
Oh, wow.
This morning, at least. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to have you on. And we're going to talk all minerals. Well, we'll talk about a bunch of different topics. Before we get into that and your company, why don't you tell the listener perhaps maybe your background and how you got into like optimizing health and things like that?
Sure. So I'm a biochemist by training, and I'd always been interested in nutrition, and I'd been an athlete. I'd wrestled, I'd played football both ways, like quarterback and defense, and run track, and always been active. I think most likely because of how intensely focused on wrestling I developed a lot of nutrient deficiencies. And I started helping my mother with different health issues she was having. I was born to older parents, and my parents really raised me as peers, and I was thankful for that. And I also knew the downside of having parents later in life, even though we were so close and I got so much quality time with them, was, all right, well, they, no one's here forever. And so I realized I went down this path of realizing that even her nutrition wasn't working. Obviously, the medication wasn't working. Medication is just not ever going to really reverse anything. That's just not how the physics and chemistry of what's in the drugs and what they do work, right? And a lot of people listening to the show understand that. And I really knew that, and it just became really, really clear. So, but I looked at nutrition, and I looked at a bunch of different tests, functional medicine tests, and went really deep. I had a background in chemistry, and it was all pretty easy after doing, organic chemistry and things like that. So I thought about it, and I realized too, I'm in this position where I know how to take an industrial process and improve it. And it seems like that's what is needed, because what was interesting is that we weren't absorbing, both her and I, at totally different ages, me in my mid-20s, her in her late 60s. And, I just could see that nutrients weren't being absorbed. Supplements weren't working, at least to the extent that they needed to. And maybe even less so than I thought. So what I did was eventually figure out a new way to get minerals to absorb in the body, and that is the company today. We not only have those amazing products that help you sleep better, have more energy, things like that, but we do testing, and we've done an upgraded version of that first test and that first consultation that I gave or received, and that changed my life. That not only the test but the consultation, even though I discovered what I'm talking about, which was, well, good news, hey, we know what to work on. The bad news is you're already taking 3 out of 5 things that you're chronically deficient in. And what do you think that means? You're chronically deficient in it, and you've been taking it for over a year. What do you think that means? So for her, it was disease and reversing things like that. And for me, it was extreme brain fog, just fatigue. And it was weird because I was fit. I had a 6-pack and, was about as fit as I am today. I've gotten back to now at, a decade later, being healthier and more fit. But, it became very clear that, fitness and health were 2 very different things, and they could go together, but they didn't always. So I did a lot of learning. I became a nutritionist. Started seeing clients as I was developing this technique, and just I kept seeing the same thing again and again and again. So it's the big areas that I realized were missing, where we're not testing often enough. Even if we quote unquote know a lot about nutrition, we're not testing often enough. I just did a podcast with a doctor yesterday she said the same thing. She's like, I haven't ever tested my minerals, and I need to. I'm going to. I'll have you back on and we'll talk about it. So there's that. And then I don't know for sure if I need this thing that I'm taking. So, and then what that becomes, I realized, is actually pretty extreme in some cases, which is you could actually be taking something that not only is it on the not so good side, it's you're not utilizing it or you're not absorbing it. On the really bad side, it's you're high in it. You don't know that you're high in it, and that's causing real issues.
Right.
And that's causing fatigue and things like that. And that's true, for example, like calcium, but that could be also if you're taking too much vitamin D and you're not utilizing it, and you're over absorbing calcium as a result, and you're not taking a list of other minerals and vitamins that balance that. So that's the kind of thing we look at, and it's incredibly important work. And I just feel so lucky to be so in alignment with doing this, because it's a process now that people can follow and get real results.
So just so people understand, your company has like an at-home hair mineral test, right? That you can do. And then how long does it take to get your results back? And then do you have some type of consultation along with that, right?
Right. About 10 business days from the time that you actually send it off from your house. And then it could be less, but it's depending on postage and things like that. So your return label's included and everything, but yeah, obviously that's part of it. And then what else were you asking?
No, I was saying there's a consultation that comes along with it. Yeah, which is really neat, because there's a lot of companies, I think, that analyze whether it's your blood or anything else, but they don't necessarily follow back up.
Right. Yeah, and that is the most important point, because when you have someone that's looking at a really complicated test for the first time on their own, that's an island. And if you're doing the test, you ostensibly have some desire to have more energy. So you're like, great, I have another thing I get to do and learn. That's in some ways, for some people, very exciting, but for others, not. And also, it's just not optimal. So what I did is I demystified this test, which is the most complicated but the most valuable test I found in functional medicine, and it's easy to take. We just need hair, and that can come from wherever on your body. We have videos on the site and things like that, and it's just a homage to how much it changed my life, and how I saw that it wasn't it wasn't understood because people were afraid of the sort of interrelationships of it and what it, oh, this is high. It doesn't necessarily mean that this thing, like the knee-jerk reactions have no place with this test type thing. You have to understand the whole picture. And for that reason, I highly recommend, I mean, we sell the test as well, but I highly recommend
The
people going through
Yeah.
yeah.
And you're testing for,
yeah.
I'm sorry, you're testing for 15 different minerals. Is that right? And like 8 heavy metals with your,
yeah, those are the primaries.
Yeah.
Right. And then we have some 7 significant ratios. And then we look at a total of 63 elements on the test, or 63 markers, I should say. But the majority of what we focus on is in the part that you mentioned. And it's amazing how much you can see and understand of the body when you see and understand that part the way it can be understood. Right.
And what's the, just high level, but what's the big difference between doing a hair test and then perhaps like a blood test?
So with blood, you get a day's worth of data. And I'm not telling people to not do blood or anything like that. But when it comes to just the area of minerals and heavy metals, you can see a lot more for a lot less with a lot more accuracy with hair. And I could go into why it is more accurate, all those things, and it just depends on how deep you want to go there, or how much time we have.
No, that's good. I just wanted sort of a high level, because I'm sure that's a question that comes up quite a bit. And you mentioned you had brain fog, and like mental fatigue and things like that. I read a little bit about it on your site. What were you deficient in? And is there something that you find that a lot of your customers are, is there like sort of a common theme that runs true with a lot of people?
Sure. Yeah. To answer both of those questions sort of simultaneously, if I may, it's what I found was that on the whole, although my levels were pretty extreme, there's a huge percentage of the population that has similar deficiencies that I had. And part of being an athlete, being a wrestler, I was very in tune with my body and very aware of how good I have felt in the past and things like that. And being an athlete, you can relate, and a lot of people listening to this can relate. I knew how much energy it would take to run the next mile or wrestle the next round, and I knew if I had plenty in reserve. And it's just a feedback loop that I became very aware of early in life. And I think because of that, I was super aware of the decline and very concerned, because what I will say is that all things that you want to accomplish in life require energy, and just eating well, eating a good diet, eating a great diet, eating the quote unquote perfect diet will not reverse mineral deficiencies. Believe it or not, it will not. The reason why is because there's just not enough of a targeted nutrient each meal consistently to reverse this gas tank, metaphorically, that is on empty, and the car is still running, and you're going down the highway and you're putting more fuel in it, and you're just putting enough to maintain the level. That's really where most people are. It's where virtually all people are. And we help them with that, because that's really no way to live. And it's impossible to live optimally. It's impossible to have as much energy as you could have and do as much as you could with that, because willpower, as we all know, I think only, and you can read BJ Fogg and Tiny Habits and 15 other books like it, and you see really quickly that willpower only gets you so far. And the less energy you have throughout your day, the more likely you are to make bad food choices, things like that, slip up, say yes, overcommit, undercommit, because out of fear of not having energy, all these things, right? So if you want to climb Everest, or if you want to write a book, or if you want to, run a marathon, or I have children, have a family, start a business. All of these things are intimately tied to what we're talking about. And I realized that at such a visceral level. I think also when my mom passed, and I thought, this is life is super finite. We all know that, but that reminder really hit home. And also when, nutrition becomes personality, and if you don't feel real well, then you don't use your body enough. You don't use your body enough, then the less you use it, the less you get to use it.
Mm.
So it's just incredibly important to test and not guess, and that's something that's one of the trademarks that we have, actually, is test, don't guess, because it's fundamental to how we look at things.
Yeah, and just going back to that, is there a common theme of deficiency that you find along a lot of people
Sure.
that do testing? And if I was going to guess, I'd say magnesium, but I'll let you answer.
Yeah, I'm glad. I knew there's something else I wanted to go back to there. So magnesium, potassium, manganese, and salt,
Okay.
or sodium. So those are all really important. Those were big for me, and I was low in just about all of those. I think I also had something that you only ever find with hair, which is hidden copper toxicity.
Mm.
You pretty much never find copper toxicity either, because I feel like, if we're here in person and everyone that's listening was in the audience, you could say, so, by a show of hands, who here has ever been tested for copper, even with blood? And no one would put their hand up, probably.
Right.
So that's really fascinating, because there's a lot of talk about hormones, and we can see hormones in hair. We can look at certain minerals, like zinc and copper, and look at the ratios and understand, well, like, Brian, your testosterone level is really good. Your estrogen, your ratio of estrogen to testosterone and progesterone is here, and although that's good, here's the optimal area we want to get it in. And the cascade from there is very powerful.
And as far as the role of these minerals, like, for example, magnesium, I know has a huge role in the body. What are sort of the high level things that it can do for people who obviously are deficient and then end up I know along with the testing, you obviously offer some supplementation for people, because I'm assuming you can get magnesium through some sources of food, but it's probably not something that's easily readable.
Right. Yeah. The interesting thing too that I will say is that for all of our products, the form that we've chosen isn't important the way it is for other approaches to absorption.
Mm-hmm.
We can put any form of magnesium. So I chose magnesium chloride because your body needs chloride. There's been a lot of teaching around different forms for these things. So just wanted to mention that, like, we could put all of the forms, any of the forms, it would have the same result, because it's not about that with our process. It's about particle size, stability, things like that. The deficiencies, though, to touch on that, yeah, for mentioning a couple of those, potassium is a muscle contraction and feeling emotionally safe, that and salt as well. Why? Well, your heart sits in a bath of sodium and potassium. Magnesium is interesting because it converts into a bunch of different hormones, including melatonin and serotonin. Serotonin helps you feel good, happy, helps you notice things in your environment, be good at your job, I would say, in a lot of ways. Melatonin helps you sleep well, and is also one of the most powerful antioxidants in the body. And you don't necessarily want to be supplementing melatonin. It is way better to supplement magnesium, because it does 800 things in the body that we know of now, and plenty more that we don't, I'm sure. So that's key. There's no oh well, if I take this, there's no option. The body can't make these elements the way it can make the hormones. So really thinking from a ground up foundational approach is how we look at things. And what I can say is that no matter where someone is, they could be a pro athlete where they're spending $1 million on nutrition and recovery every couple of months. Um, they could be 70 plus. They could be 18 or less, and still there's deficiencies. There's things to optimize. And if you're not doing this, you're missing things, is what I found again and again, which is why I'm so psyched to continue learning, continue growing this area, and continue teaching it through our different nutritionists that we have on staff. And so it's really interesting to see that. Now, some of the others that I mentioned, like manganese is key for thyroid function and core body temp. So if someone's cold all the time, now most people don't get enough of that. That's a super common deficiency. And that's manganese, not magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of our products as well. We have different products in blends as well, like upgraded memory, 5 minerals that help with memory. Manganese is one of those. It's key for helping you create neural pathways. So yeah, there's a lot to it, and anything we want to do from a physiology standpoint is needed to be supported by minerals. And we also need to be aware of heavy metals, so we look at those too.
Yeah. And with the heavy metal test, I'm assuming is mercury tested?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just curious. My wife loves ahi tuna.
Oh man.
I know. And it's one of those things where I'm sure you can have some, but you just don't want to get carried away with especially I think it's the bigger fish, right? That cause
Sure.
the toxicity of mercury. What would be some telltale signs if someone is perhaps maybe have some type of poisoning from heavy metals that people could get, that would maybe.
The biggest thing that we see is fatigue.
Okay.
Yeah, and that comes in the form of endocrine disruption, so thyroid and adrenals, just not receiving signaling from pituitary, for example. Yeah, there's a lot. So that's energy. That's also metabolism. So weight gain, just mood being off too, which is just usually hand in hand with low energy, is mood being off. So
now,
or being tired easily. Also chronic inflammation. You see, because again, you're interrupting a process that creates energy and speeds up your metabolism, opens up detox pathways, supports the removal of anti-nutrients. So yeah, all of that. And then memory loss with aluminum, things like that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine 99%, 98% of the people don't realize if they have heavy metal toxicity. They probably think it's something else, I would imagine, a lot of the times, right?
I think so. And the best way, what's interesting too, is the best way to really remove them is through
sweat.
Yeah, through nature's process, which is remineralizing the body and sweating. Yeah. So you need to be plugging these gaps where these heavy metals are trying to activate enzyme pathways. And yeah, so that's when you're not doing that, you have the ability to accumulate more heavy metals. So hence, again, minerals. And by minerals, I really mean like the ones we've covered, for example, and others. You just need to have them in certain ratios. I see a lot of people that don't take in enough salt, don't take in enough potassium. The others I mentioned already, and boron is another. And these are all really, key for different factors inside the body that are really essential. So it's interesting to really geek out on this area and understand just how interrelated we are at a cellular level, and how consistently impactful it is for people to reverse it and really get a handle on their health.
And let's talk maybe salt, a little bit about salt. I think there's a misconception, especially in maybe the older audience or people that have just grown up around that, the messaging that was out there regarding low salt diets and things like that.
Sure.
And obviously you're seeing companies that like Element and, I think the Rob Wolf's company and others too.
Yeah, ours as well. We have a electrolyte product
Oh,
out
do you? Okay.
probably next week,
Oh,
finally.
there you
Yeah,
go.
worked on it for over a year and a half. So that's going to be great.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
salt's an important factor of that for sure. Yeah.
I try to salt all my food with like the Redmond's real salt.
Sure. Yeah, I like them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know those guys, good people for
Oh,
sure.
really? Yeah. They got to be killing it, I'd imagine. I think they're doing all right.
Yeah.
I hear their name pop up quite a bit.
Mhm.
So is that enough though? Or I think that's obviously reasoning to get tested. Is
Mhm.
is it enough? I mean, I'm not like a huge sweater, but I work out a lot. I'm active and things like that. I mean, I've gotten
It,
blood test. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, that's a great point. It usually isn't.
Yeah.
Kind of surprisingly, I feel like that's where your intuition's guiding you. And the cool thing is that your intuition gets even stronger when you test more often. So this isn't just I'm going to do the test once every 2 years. It's like, no, ideally you do this every 3 months because it gives you a new map. And when you're using tools that really work, you get results, and then you end up in a better place. But that's not the map forever. Like that changes. And
Hmm.
I've personally done it and fallen off of it and got back on,
Yeah.
and you start going, well, God, what's wrong? I'm like, my sleep's not great like it was a couple months ago. It's like, well, you're off track now. You don't have a map anymore. And it's frustrating. So what I always tell people is that the time you spend on nutrition gets amplified. It gets returned to you with, many times over, because your mental state, you're happier. You probably don't spend as much on things you don't need. There's all sorts of things that come into it, but certainly you have more energy and you get more done. So yeah, it's so key. It's interesting how it all kind of connects.
And we were talking before we got online here. Fasting is something that I've aligned myself with over the last bunch of years, and have clients working with clients and have the journal and things. Perhaps let's talk about the role that sort of minerals could have in helping people fast. And I know something I talk about is putting some salt in your water, and but I'm just curious, and what kind of role does it play with fasting and also within your life? I don't know if this is something that you do.
Sure. Yeah, I do different forms of fasting pretty often. I'm a fan of extended fasting, and I'm writing a book on that right now.
Oh, nice.
And this topic actually with minerals and teaching people how to fast without pain, which is something I've figured out pretty well after doing multiple long fasts. Did one to heal some injuries that was a little over 11 days, and that was actually, it became easy. It became
Yeah.
just a different sort of way of
When did you do that?
moving through the world. It's about a year ago.
Okay.
And I by day 8, my injuries had healed. I had a partially pulled hamstring that, started to really feel better and better. And by day 8, it was just like normal. Your body's healing when it's not digesting. And when you have minerals to activate different glands, so I knew my mineral levels going into the fast, so that was helpful. I knew where I was. And then I took we have a product called Peak Thyroid, which supports thyroid function, and I've formulated that to be able to have anyone be able to take it because it's a balanced level. So over time, you can just, balance your level if you're high or low. It's minerals the thyroid needs regardless of where you are. And then if you know your levels more ideally, you can also take like individuals. So I took that as a base, and I take some of our iodine, I take more of our selenium, and sometimes more of our zinc. So, but peak thyroid has some copper in it, which is great as well. And copper is also, I think a lot of people don't know that copper is essential for ATP production as well. So that's your how you feel between heavy sets at the gym, for example. I just got back from this morning doing the heaviest weight workout for legs, for lower body I've done in months. And some of the things I did last night and this morning prior were copper, were magnesium, were things that are going to fuel ATP, and knowing like, all right, I'm going to go in there and like really, really hit it hard today. And that felt good. I'm sure I'll be sore. And it's cool to be able to do that. And I mentioned working out there too, because I worked out for the first 8 or 9 days of that fast. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Was it just a water fast? Or
water and minerals. Yeah. Water, minerals, little sips of tea, black coffee before noon, things like that.
Okay. So a little bit of coffee, a little bit of tea, and
yeah, things like that. And those, almost coffee, two cups of coffee can as much as double your ketone production. So, and for nearly everyone, it's going to keep their blood sugar and their insulin stable and their mTOR stable, which at that point, your body, for all purposes, thinks you're fasting. Now, coffee, technically, a cup might have 3 to 5 calories, something like that. But that's just not how the body interprets it, really. And it just makes you, it will help people fast more often if they have little bits of that. Green tea, for sure. Green tea, coffee, other herbal teas. Some you can get into a point where they, some teas will have a little more calories like that. But ultimately, you want to stay in this autophagy state, and there's a lot of things that you can consume that will not break your fast. And those are obviously all some. And minerals, probably the most important. Beyond those were plenty of salt, and but more important than the salt, I found, was magnesium for keeping my sort of adrenaline down. Something like helping me stay grounded. And then helping me get to sleep at night. I slept really well with less hours of sleep, and no surprise, because, well, your body it just doesn't need the same amount of sleep. I went ahead and tried to sleep as much as possible because I was healing injuries too. But yeah, it's interesting to think about, because if you picture your body constantly digesting food, you start to think like, wow, fast every so often, it really is a good idea, isn't it? Like, it's really a loving thing to do for your body. It's caring, and people think it's painful, and it's somehow like extracting pleasure and comfort from the body. And really, the body is like, man, look, if you're over 10% body fat, you can fast for quite a while, most likely. And, understanding that, going into that, obviously, consult someone that you have confidence in their nutritional advice, someone that you're working with. I have to say that disclaimer, but I am that person for myself. So,
well, yeah, you definitely want to listen to yourself. And so you've done some extended fasts, and what about on like a, let's say, daily, weekly basis? Are you doing just a certain?
Yeah, I like to time restrict and eat within a certain window. And I've written articles like 7 reasons not to eat breakfast and things like that. And I will say, I'm never so militant or dogmatic. Just I can tell if I need to eat, if I actually need to eat. But when you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about food, you're usually dehydrated. And if you'll drink a quart of water, a liter of water, and have some salt in there, have your minerals in there, and then get outside, get some sunlight in your eyes, you're probably going to forget about food pretty quickly. Your mind's going to open up, and you just got back quite a bit of time during the most important part of your day.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that's another reason I love fasting is you definitely start accumulating a lot more time to do things and not worry about, your next meal.
right.
What's your typical window?
I somewhere between 11 and 7.
Okay. 7.
Yeah.
Oh, between 11 o'clock and 7. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you
Yeah.
were meaning hours but so you'll be done eating by your last meal is at 7 or you're done by 7. Okay.
Right. Right.
And then,
I usually try to be done by dark whenever
yeah.
darkness is. There's more and more research talking, relating to deuterium depletion and eating outside, eating where there's natural light, and also just very clearly beyond that, we tend to just we don't overeat as much but when our body's confused because we're inside, we don't have fresh air, and we have artificial lighting, it's kind of like in a super mild panic state, is how I describe it. And then that's why you get that feeling when you're out in nature and you put your phone away. It's you're away from EMFs and radiation and artificial light, and the air is cleaner. Like it's our natural state. And when we eat in that state, we obviously overeat less because we're naturally happier. And we're not using food to soothe us, which is something that became incredibly obvious to me during the long fast that I mentioned, and sort of living outside of society and going, quote, to dinner with friends and just going like, yeah, I'm going to come. I just want to let you know I'm not going to eat, but I'm going to come hang out with with all of you. So things like that. Yeah, it's just interesting to see from a sort of almost a third person observer point of how much time we spend eating, thinking about food, preparing who we're going to eat with, timing, how do we get it, all these things.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think the biggest thing with any type of fasting is just, I always say, staying busy. I'm curious, like I'm sure I think a lot of times, and I find this even with myself, I'm just like, sometimes especially in the winter in Chicago, it's like you're bored. You're like, okay, well, maybe I'll just have a meal.
Right.
Yeah. Did you just try to keep your mind busy a lot? And I'm sure you were obviously working. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I got a lot done. I got what seemed like a month's worth of work done in 10 days, the first 10 days. And then 11 was a Sunday. So I was just sort of resting and went out, did a light sort of paddle boarding day. And it was relaxing. I was like, it could go longer, but I think I've achieved just, my intuition said, I've achieved what I set out here to do. And to go much longer than that, you can start to have things like die off from the gut of good bacteria. So but I could feel after like day 6, I was like, no, I personally right now could go longer, and I feel that, and I feel that I should, and it was very clear. And then I was like, well, let me try to go to 10. Let me make that the goal, but also knowing that I'm going to if I suddenly feel even in the direction of anything but stellar, then I'm going to pause, because of this has been great work, and I've taken what could have been a nagging injury for the rest of my life, or years or months. Maybe you had to have surgery and just didn't need to, because you get stem cells that come out of bone marrow after about day 5. sometimes a little sooner. And, they don't care what they heal. And really, it's really cool. So I did the equivalent of a $20,000 stem cell surgery for just having the discipline and wherewithal to do it fast, do it well, support my adrenals. I upgraded potassium, upgraded magnesium, the salt, thyroid minerals, things like that. And that really covered the bases.
So obviously with all your supplements, obviously no issue on an empty stomach taking them.
No, not at all. The only issue people run into is if they don't dilute them enough with a fluid. So any liquid, their favorite beverage, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, people, we'll have some of our products in a 2-ounce bottle, and people will kind of surprisingly say like, oh, it didn't taste good. It's like, it shouldn't taste like anything. Read the directions and dilute it, but I get it. People are in a hurry, and I've been in a hurry, plenty of times when taking these supplements and things like that. But, the directions are there for a reason.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So upgraded formulas, when did you start the company?
Started in 2016.
2016. Okay. And I noticed you have a partnership.
Officially, at least, but there's years of research before that. So, yeah.
And you have a partnership with Charity Water.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Maybe speak on that for.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to. They're phenomenal. I get it. A lot of people have their favorite charity. What's cool about them is they run it so proficiently, which is they 100% of what you or I donate goes to drilling water wells around the world. And that is obviously a root cause problem, arguably the most root cause, because when you don't have water, anything else doesn't matter. Even sanitation doesn't matter. Certainly cell phones and education doesn't matter until you have that. And you increase the odds of those things succeeding. So to me, it's very, so I've personally given to them, the company's given to them for years, something like 7 or 8 years. And so from very, very early on. And what's cool is that they have one event a year that takes care of their salary, so their overhead is nothing. And that's just how charity should be run, I think, so that people can get paid whatever they get paid for running the charity, and then
the rest goes.
But that's from the gala. That's from and you're completely clear and transparent with, hey, here are the salaries for everyone here, and so that event covers overhead. And then for the entire rest of the year, that's just one in-person event, usually in New York. And then donations, you can donate your birthday, link it up through Facebook, Instagram, things like that, and have people give you, $20 instead of a gift that you might not have used anyway. So.
Yeah, no, I was looking into that company or the nonprofit. It's Charity Water, and you can find you guys. Is it just upgradedformulas.com?
That's right.
And before we sign off here, what one tip would you give an individual maybe that's in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that is maybe looking to get their health back in order and get their body back and to what it once was, maybe when they were in their 20s?
I would say focus on sleep, because sleep is where you're going to heal and recover, and reduce inflammation, which is more and more an issue. And then the biggest improvement I found in sleep in a supplement is upgraded magnesium. We have people message us all like daily with screenshots of their Oura Ring and different sleep trackers. And we repost some of those on social media, so you can find that at Upgraded Formulas, at Ask Barton on IG. And it's really cool to see people consistently report numbers that I find just incredible. I've seen them for myself too, but we've seen people increase their deep sleep on Aura and REM, different people, by 30 to 40%, and have it maintained. which is over baseline, which is absurd, truly. That's so much more healing, reduction. That's life extension right there for sure. And that's without even doing our testing, our protocol. So yeah, that's really big. And I would say, sleep in a dark room, have it as cold as possible. Just, read a couple books on sleep. Follow some of our YouTube's upgraded formulas, and listen, maybe re-listen to this podcast. But we dropped a lot of good stuff for people. And I think if you implement this, it's going to be a great 2022 for people. So
Awesome. Well, Barton, I appreciate you coming on. And I'm definitely, my wife
Great
and we'll talk more down, but I definitely want to get tested, hair test and mineral tested for both myself and my wife. So I'll have to report back with you.
That's great. Yeah, I'd love to hear the results. It's always so interesting to hear people's firsthand accounts.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Hey, Get Lean, Eat Clean Nation. Are you a man between the ages of 40 and 60 years old, looking to lose inches around your waist, have significantly more energy throughout the day, and gain muscle, all while minimizing the risk of injuries? Well, I'm looking for 3 to 5 people to work one-on-one with in my Fat Burner Blueprint Signature program, which I've developed by utilizing my 15 years experience in the health and fitness space. This program is designed specifically for those committed to making serious progress towards their health goals over the next 6 months. We will focus on sleep, stress, nutrition, meal timing, and building lean muscle. If this sounds like a fit for you, email me at brian@briangrin.com with the subject line Blueprint. That's brian@briangrin.com with the subject line Blueprint. Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.